My name's Michael Bennett, and I'm the author of Pathfinders, a history of Aboriginal trackers in New South Wales. Aboriginal trackers were men and women who had traditional bush skills and were employed by the police to do a variety of tasks for pursuing bushrangers, looking for people lost in the bush, looking after the police horses. It's a fascinating and diverse history, and largely an untold story I've found in New South Wales. There are over 1,000 Aboriginal men and some Aboriginal women who were employed by the police to do those tasks over a 100-year period. And it's perhaps only now coming to light the extent to which they contributed to the maintenance of law and order in New South Wales. One aspect of Aboriginal history that's been underappreciated is that traditional skills that Aboriginal people maintained even after colonisation enabled them to find a place in the broader economy. They had those bush skills to follow those subtle signs that people lost in the bush would leave, that the criminals who were stealing mobs of sheep and taking them across the landscape. The trackers were able to see those signs and follow them and find and save those lives of the people who were lost in the bush, and then arrest the thieves as well. So they were important skills that protected the broader economy and also enabled trackers to find a place in wider society. The late 1800s in particular, of course, was a very difficult time for Aboriginal people across New South Wales and across Australia. They were subject to a variety of racist policies and attitudes, which made it very difficult for them to find a place to look after their families. And trackers were able to in some cases, maintain those jobs with the police for over 50 years. They were paid for that work. Not a great amount, unfortunately, but at least it enabled them to find a place in the wider society and then use that income to support their families. It placed Aboriginal men and women in a very difficult position though, because by working for the police, and sometimes they were faced with divided loyalties, particularly when they were asked to track other Aboriginal people. So that's something that trackers had to weigh up. Sometimes their loyalties were with the police and then they suffered the consequences themselves. Other times their loyalties were with their own community, and there are numerous examples where trackers would purposely lead the police in the wrong direction, so to speak, to protect other Aboriginal members of their community. So it's all these diverse stories that are part of the history of New South Wales that I would like, I guess, the readers to be able to absorb and get a better understanding of how Aboriginal people have survived. Because those skills are still there today in New South Wales. Trackers aren't employed, but Aboriginal people still have that knowledge. I guess perhaps it goes back to my childhood. The first tracker I ever heard about was tracker Alec Riley. I grew up in Dubbo, in the central west of New South Wales. That's Wiradjuri country. And in the 1980s, I didn't learn very much about Aboriginal history at school. I went to school with a lot of Aboriginal kids. I knew a lot of Aboriginal families. And my grandparents told me about Tracker Riley, and that they'd known him and that he used to work for the police, helping out with various cases. And I think that sort of planted the seed in my mind. How fascinating, I wonder what a tracker is. And I was generally interested in history anyway, and I've gone on to pursue a career in that. And it was through eventually my work in native title that I was going back to Dubbo and researching some of the Aboriginal history there for a native title claim. And I got to meet members of the Riley family and learn so much more about Tracker Riley. So he worked for the police for 40 years. He was responsible for solving numerous murders. It was a bit unusual going back to Dubbo and discovering that there were all these murders that were happening in my own hometown. But I guess every place has its dark history. But he was such a phenomenal man. He was, by all accounts, very measured and quiet, but he was extremely skilled and observant, and the police really So look, aside from Pathfinders, and I'm certainly keen for everyone to buy a copy of the book and to read that, to learn more, and there's so many trackers. I couldn't speak about all the trackers in New South Wales, but I have a website, Pathfinders New South Wales, which again explores the history of Aboriginal trackers. So there's more trackers there that I've mentioned in the book. So if you'd like to learn even more, I recommend you go to the website and check out some of the incredible stories.